Hello, my name is Susan, and we're here for another episode of Crafting at Home with Aaron Public Library, and we're on week 2 of our Clay Pot Extravaganza. Last week we made a 3-tier garden display. Today we are going to be making clay pots that are decorated with napkins. So we're going to go ahead and get started by talking about our supplies. Our supplies today will include twine, napkins, Mod Podge, and a 3.5-inch clay pot. This has already been painted. I'll explain what I did in a minute. We're going to be using some paper towels. I have some wax paper just to protect my table because I'm going to be using the Mod Podge. And our tools today include a paintbrush, an X-Acto knife, and scissors. So we're going to go ahead and get started. As I said, we're using napkins. Now I have chosen what they call a luncheon napkin. It's smaller because we have a 3.5-inch clay pot. If you are going to use a larger pot, then you might want to consider the larger napkin. So this is a luncheon napkin, and what I didn't know until I started working with this is that napkins are 3-ply. You have the beautiful colored layer and then 2 white layers that are embossed or attached to it. So the first thing you have to do is very carefully peel away those white layers, and you'll kind of feel a little resistance as you're doing it. I don't know if you can hear that, but that's how it's attached. There you go. So now we have just the beautiful colored part of the napkin, and you can get these napkins everywhere. Working with a pattern that is all over and not necessarily going in one direction is a good idea. And let's talk about the paint on the pot. You want a white base coat when you're going to attach the napkin, because if you have white in the background versus the clay color, that white intensifies the color of your napkin. If you had just the normal clay there, you kind of lose all those brilliant colors in your napkin. This pot has 2 layers of flat white acrylic paint, and then I painted the rim with 2 layers of the color that I wanted, and I simply picked up the colors that were in the napkin. Now you'll notice it's kind of sloppy here, but that's okay because all that is going to get covered up with the napkin. I did paint the inside. You don't have to. That's totally up to you. Now, we don't need this whole napkin in order to cover this clay pot. So what I've done is I've just taken half of the napkin. So here's a piece which is approximately 1/2 of a napkin. And that's what we're going to actually attach to our clay pot today. Now I am using the orange label gloss Mod Podge. I just have it in this container because it's a little bit easier to work with. It has that larger mouth, it's easier to get to it, and I don't end up with my hand covered in Mod Podge. Also, I'm going to be attaching this napkin to the clay pot with Mod Podge, and I'm using a paintbrush, which is very different. But the reason I'm doing that is because this is now literally a layer of tissue paper. And you have to be very, very careful in how you work with it. And I'll be honest with you, before I got to the pots that you see today, I went through 5 pots that didn't work very well. This is tissue paper, and it is very not forgiving. Okay, so you may have noticed I'm holding the napkin like this. So I'm all the way up at the top. I'm covering the rim with the paper, but I'm not going to attach the napkin to that. The napkin will only be attached to the white part of the pot. You want to stay away from that rim altogether. So you want to be under that lip. So I'm going to start applying Mod Podge, and I want a very thin layer, very thin. So I'm just going to cover maybe a sixth of the pot. And I don't want any thick globs of Mod Podge. I want it to be thin. I'm not worried about the bottom at all. I just want to come just to the edge of the pot. Alright, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take my napkin and I am going to, holding it way up here, so I'm covering the rim of the pot, I'm going to gently lay that on the Mod Podge and I am going to press it in or tap it in. Tap is probably a better word. I'm just tapping it in. You want to make sure that you tap at the lip or the rim of the pot. You'll feel the glue or Mod Podge. Then I'm carefully going to peel this back till it stops, and I'm going to add the next layer. Again, very thin, going just to the rim. Don't worry about the bottom. I don't know if you can see how thin this is, but it's thin. Now I'm very carefully going to fold this over. And again, you're patting or tapping or pushing. Don't try and do this. If you try and do this, that layer will rip. Now, you can tell I'm almost at the edge of my napkin here. And I don't want a whole lot of paper here when I get to the joining point. So I'm going to take my scissors and I am just going to cut this. I'm just doing it by eye so that I have a straight edge. That's all I want. The fact that this isn't straight up here doesn't make any difference because I'm going to cut that off anyway. So now I'm going to roll this back and I'm going to add some Mod Podge just to the rim. Don't go on the rim because I want that colored rim to stand separately. And I'm going to just push this over and tap it into the Mod Podge. Now, as you're looking at it, if you have some, go ahead and make sure that edge is pushed down. If you have some little bubbles in there, push them in. Don't try and pull your hand, just push it in. So now I have to go to the other side of the pot, do the same thing, but now I'm going to come in this direction. And again, I want to start at that rim and just give myself a thin layer. I just noticed that I put a little extra up here on the rim. I don't want that. I'm going to pull it back. I'm going to grab a little piece of paper towel and get that out of there. Alright, so I'm going to take my napkin, gently pushing it in. Now you may have noticed that the napkin is not going straight. That's okay. It's at odd sizes up here because your pot isn't straight. You're going on a rounded surface. But we're going to trim that away. So I'm just going to add more Mod Podge. There are lovely demonstrations on how to do this on Pinterest and on YouTube. Just put in how to cover a clay pot with a napkin. So I'm just pushing this in. Now I'm back, I'm almost at this point where the first seam went down. So again, I don't want all this extra paper over there. So I'm just going to take my scissors and I'm just going to go ahead and trim it so it kind of matches that. You are going to have to clean your scissors when you're done. So I'm going to add a layer here. And then I'm going to fold this over and just tap it into that Mod Podge. All right. I'm going to put a layer of Mod Podge on the outside right here to hold that seam down. The Mod Podge will dry clear. So that's going to hold that seam flat. Now, we are going to take care of this thing down here. Because we've got that paper, it's kind of in an odd shape. You can, if you want to, just trim it along the edge of the pot. What I'd like to do is show you how I wrapped it around the bottom. The first thing I did was just trim off a little bit of this. And I'm going to cover the base of that pot with Mod Podge. Oh, I'm sorry. The first thing I'm going to do is I am going to cut some slits in here. And I'm just using the bottom of the pot as a guide for where my scissors should go. Now I'm going to cover it with Mod Podge. Okay, and then I'm going to take each one of these little pieces and fold it into the Mod Podge. Hold it down for just a second. And you do want to make sure all the little edges go down. And I wasn't kidding when I said I went through 5 pots. So be sure you have extra pots when you try this. Extra napkins too. Alright. So I have my napkin attached. Just the base coat of Mod Podge is underneath. I did get that seam. And we're just going to let this sit for a minute. And I want to show you how to trim off that paper up at the top. Now, on each one of the pots that we are finished here, each one of these has 2 layers of white paint as the base coat. Then you have 2 layers of the color up here and 1 layer of the color on the inside. Now you could have left the rims just in their natural state. You could have painted them, you could have covered them with a napkin if you wished. Then I added, remember there's 1 coat of Mod Podge holding the napkin on. In addition to that, there are 3 more coats of Mod Podge that are sealing the napkin and the color to the pot. Now, I left half an hour to 45 minutes in between each one of those layers, and I'm not going to be able to do that during our video here, but again, you have 2 layers of white, and then 2 layers of this color on your rim, and then just 1 on the inside. You have that base coat of Mod Podge, which is holding the napkin on, and then I put 3 coats of Mod Podge over this. Now, I just used the gloss Mod Podge. I didn't use the outside one. On the theory that I would be bringing these in at night, not leaving them outside. And you can use them to hold napkins, you can use them to hold utensils, you could put a little plant in here. You can use it any way you wish. Okay, what I would like to show you is how you have to trim this off. So I'm just going to move the Mod Podge out of the way for a minute, and I'm going to get my X-Acto knife. Now, I don't know if you can see where the rim of the pot is. I'm going to take my X-Acto knife, and at the base of that rim, I am going to put a little cut. But but you can't pull that paper yet. If you pull it, I'm going to make another little cut, because remember, this is basically wet tissue paper. There we go. I don't know if you can see it. I have just the barest beginning of a cut. If you pull it, it will rip. Now, if it rips up towards the rim, that's no problem. If it rips down into the pot, that is a problem. Okay, I'm going to do another cut. There we go. I just want to cut this away so you can see. Okay. So you can see where I'm cutting, right at the base of the rim. And even though we let it sit, and I would let it sit longer, I would let it sit at least half an hour, 45 minutes. Paper holds moisture for a long time, and that's when you get that ripping effect. Oops, does not want to cut. I think we'll just go a little bit further. There we go. Now I just noticed that I cut so hard I took some of the paint off, but that's why if you cover it with twine or baker's twine or ribbon, nobody will know that you cut the paint off. I'll try going the other way. I think part of the problem I'm having is that it is still wet. That's okay. We're just going to power through. And again, if you were able to let this sit for a while, it would cut better for you. This one is really going to need twine to cover it. You do have to be patient, and you do have to go slow. There we go. Now again, it's going to get, in my case, it's going to get covered with twine or ribbon. Alright, so not the world's best trimming job, but the napkin is attached all the way around, it's attached on the bottom. So at this point, I would tell you that I put on 3 coats of Mod Podge. And again, especially for this first coat on top, use a small brush, because remember, this is still in the tissue paper stage here. And you're going to go over the entire surface carefully, because remember, you're working with wet paper. If you go too fast, it will rip. Now, if you've worked with Mod Podge before, you're used to this milky color that you get. It is going to dry clear and shiny. The other thing that I would suggest, if you've got any loose bits up there, go ahead and get those glued down. The other thing that you probably should do, which I didn't do, I forgot, is because I'm going to paint the bottom, I'm going to paint the rim. You want to put it upside down to dry. I just want to smooth out all that Mod Podge. I don't want any rivers of Mod Podge here. And just put it upside down on a glass or a jar, something so that the edges are protected. Almost around here. Now, if there is another kind of, if you have a different sealer that you like a varnish or something, you're certainly welcome to go with whatever sealer you prefer and have good luck with. Alright, I've gone all the way around, especially at that rim there. So I'm going to do the bottom. And again, especially that edge, because that's just an edge of folded paper there. And now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the colored rim as well. Now you could leave it flat, or you could use a flat Mod Podge on there so that it looks different. So there we go. Doesn't look like much now, but when it's done, I'm just going to take this and put it down here. When it's done, you will have a beautiful shine. You get the pattern of the napkin. Again, this is 2 yards. I don't know if I mentioned that. That's 2 yards of twine just wrapped around. I was afraid that I was going to have to hot glue it down, but it didn't. It pretty much stayed where it was. You could use ribbon, you could use washi tape, you could choose to do nothing and just leave it just the pot and the paint. So there you go, clay pots covered with simple napkins, a little bit of Mod Podge, a little bit of twine, and a lot of patience. Enjoy.